I know that you people like to listen to our chilling stories while sleeping on your beds, so do this before you fall asleep. While listening to the story, I will be happy to know from which country you are listening to this story. Please let me know by commenting, and if you are new to our channel, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. So let's go. Story 2. Are you ready to know the most terrifying secret of Queen Mary's ship? Queen Mary's ship, Journey of Death. My name is David, and the story I'm going to tell you about is the most terrifying experience of my life. I am telling you the truth. I have felt all this myself. If you are weak-hearted, then don't read this story, because whatever I saw can drive you crazy, even in your dreams. Part 1. Beginning of a haunted ship. I was very fond of horror and haunted places. I had read haunted stories from all over the world, but after what happened to me on the Queen Mary ship, I could never dare to go to any haunted place. Last year, I and my 2 friends, Michael and Sarah, went to California. This trip was an adventure, and when we came to know that Queen Mary ship is a haunted hotel, we decided without thinking to spend a night there. As soon as we boarded the ship, I felt an amazing cold breeze. It was the month of November, but the cold here was so different, as if someone had seen sadness connected with the wind. The ship looked extremely royal from inside, old wooden floors, big chandeliers, and a strange silence which was making this place even more of a palace of living creatures. We reached the reception, where a Buddhist receptionist started giving a strange smile as soon as he saw us. I casually asked, "Are the haunted stories here true?" The man remained silent for a moment, then spoke in soft words. "Just one advice. Stay away from cabin B340. I started laughing after hearing this. I said to Michael and Sarah, "Guys, we will stay in this cabin only." At first both of us were dead, but then we thought that these must be just stories. Little did we know that this was not a joke, but a warning. Part 2. B340, Maut Ka Dawasa. Silence of the night and strange coldness. It was 11:45 p.m. At night, we were in our cabin B340. This was the same cabin about which the most scary stories were told, but we thought that all these would be fabricated rumors. As soon as we stepped into the cabin, the air inside felt far, strangely heavy. It seemed as if some invisible burden had been placed on our body as soon as we entered the room. As soon as we entered the room, a strange smell filled our nostrils. Dampness, rotten wood, and a slight smoldering smell, as if something old was burning slowly. The room was very old. Thick wooden doors, slightly torn wallpaper on the walls, and dust in the corners. The scariest thing was an old mirror placed in the middle of the room. The old and blurred mirror was encased in a strange metal frame. It seemed as if the mirror had come alive with time. Fun, and the first strange incident. We put our bags away and started having fun. Michael was telling his scary stories as usual, and Sarah was busy on the phone. I was just sitting and observing the room. Then the first strange thing happened. The lights in the room started dimming slowly for no apparent reason. Sarah joked, "David, you chose this hotel just to scare me, right?" I laughed and said, "Yeah, and now the ghosts are going to come and meet you." We all burst out laughing. And then, suddenly everything changed. Right after we laughed, the lights went off completely in one go. The room went pitch dark. So dark that we couldn't even see our own palms. There was only a faint light coming from one place, from an old mirror in the corner of the room. I looked closely, and then my heart started pounding loudly. There was a shadow in the mirror. Was it someone or something? The shadow was different from ours. The three of us were standing side by side, but there was another figure in the mirror, a tall, blurry human shape, but it wasn't a face. Its head was tilted, and it seemed to be moving slowly. I looked at Michael and Sarah, nervously. "What? Are you guys seeing this too?" I asked in a trembling voice. Sarah nodded slowly, and I could see it her eyes were scared. Michael slowly turned on his phone's flashlight and shone the light on the mirror, but as soon as the light fell on the mirror, the shadow disappeared. Someone was with us in the dark. Suddenly, strong cold wind ran across the room. Sarah screamed loudly and grabbed her throat. Oh my God, my throat. I feel like someone is choking me. I tried to run to her, but I felt a strange stiffness in my legs. It felt like someone had glued my feet to the ground. Michael said loudly, "Something is wrong here. We have to get out of here." Just then, there was a loud knock on the door. Tock, tock, tock. We were left breathless. There was someone. But who was it? Maki, sequence of knocks and a terrifying message. The knocking on the door was getting louder and deeper, as if someone was trying to break the door with all their might. Sarah started crying loudly. "Please, someone get us out of here." Michael mustered up the courage to peek out of the door's peephole. And then, what he saw shook us to our very core. Michael stepped back and fell down hard. "What happened? Who is outside?" I asked in panic. Michael's eyes were wide. His voice was shaking. "There is no one outside, but a shadow is standing right in front of the door." I immediately mustered up the courage to look through the peephole, and I screamed. There was no one standing outside, but still a shadow was peeking from under the door. As I stepped back, suddenly a message appeared in red inside the glass. "Get out." What will happen now? The room had now turned into a more cage of death. The door was closed. There were no windows. And there was someone with us. Someone who was making us feel cold to our bones. Will we survive? The next part is going to be even scarier. Are you ready for it? Part 3, was that someone or something? I still remember that night which was not just a horror story but a living graveyard. A night which could kill you not just in dreams but in reality too. Journey in the dark. My heart was beating so fast that I felt it might all come out of the room in a hurry. The atmosphere of the room had become absolutely lifeless, as if someone had put air full of ghosts inside. I started taking slow steps towards the mirror. Every step felt like I was stepping into a swamp. The feet were getting full, and the air had become so cold that it became difficult to breathe. And then I saw in that mirror. It was a man, but I couldn't see his face. It was just a black shadow. His head was slowly rising up as if he was looking at me. Or maybe he was looking at me. Red eyes. Yes, his eyes were absolutely red, like two inner tunnels filled with blood. His face, a strange cheek with a tail, became clearly visible. Black, burnt, and as if someone had torn his flesh. His mouth started opening slowly. I felt as if some sharp cheek would come out from inside him. But no, just a roaring voice came, as if a dead person was taking his last breaths. "Go away." My heart got stuck in my bones. I screamed, "Michael, Sarah." I shook Michael and Sarah hard. "Wake up, wake up. Is there someone here?" Michael immediately turned on the torch, but as soon as the light fell on the mirror, who was there disappeared. But the wind, it was still not cold. It had become cold. A very strong gust of wind entered the room, and then Sarah grabbed her neck with her hand and hit her cheek hard. Fingers of half-dead hands. Sarah had fallen down. Her eyes were coming out, as if someone was pressing her throat from inside. Her hands were on her throat, but I could see that someone else's hands were also on her throat. Black straight hands, as if fingers of half-dead person were pressed on her throat. Sarah's eyes had started turning red. Michael, help her. Michael was really scared. He tried to pull Sarah's hand, but instead of catching anything, her hands went into the air, as if there was no one, just a shadow of blind death. Sarah was screaming loudly. "Leave me! Leave me! Leave me!" And just then, a sharp knock started on the room door. Tok, tok, tok. Once, 2 times. 3rd time. A knock started with a very sharp cheek and became more intense, as if someone was breaking the door to get inside the room. Inside the mirror, it was written, "Get out." I was running towards the door, but as my attention went towards the mirror, a new graveyard was shown. Inside the mirror, it was written in blood, "Get out." And this time, it wasn't just written. The blood was flowing slowly, as if it was fresh blood from someone's body. And then, from inside the mirror, a hand started coming out. A black, clean hand, as if like a dead person had taken his hand out of his grave, whose hands were slowly coming out of the mirror. And then, the glass of the mirror broke with one jerk, and there was someone standing in front of us. Nobody. There was something. A human corpse without a face, who was slowly moving forward. His stale hands, which had come out of the bones, were moving towards us. Sarah was crying loudly, and Michael was unconscious, in a corner. And then, the room door opened loudly. In front, the same receptionist was standing. His face was clear. He said just one line, "And I told you, don't stay here." What happened next? We all ran away from the ship without thinking anything, but as soon as we got off the ship, we saw a City photo frame. In it was the same receptionist. But this was not possible, because below the frame, it was written, "James Carter, receptionist, died 1952. Even today, I think, if we had stayed there for one more minute, would we also have become a part of that photo? Part 4. The door was closed, and death was inside. It was pitch dark. The light inside the room was now flickering like a weak, peeled bulb, as if its light also wanted to run away from here. Without caring about anything, we picked up all our things and ran away. My senses were filled with excitement. The beat of my heart seemed to have reached my throat. But as I tried to open the door, who was closed? "Michael, try harder," I shouted. Michael used all his strength, but the door didn't move even an inch. A voice came from behind. "You can't go from here." That voice was of a peaked child, but there was no life in it. That voice was soft, cold and dead, as if a child was sitting in the middle of a graveyard, surrounded by soil, with only one voice coming out. My blood froze. Michael shouted loudly again. "Someone open the door!" But there was no one, just that voice, that lifeless, inhuman voice. And then, a hand came out from under the bed. Darkness appeared before my eyes. That hand, it was black, clean. It smelled of errant mania. Its nails were so long that it seemed as if someone had sharpened them by rubbing ghee on a stone. For a moment my breathing stopped, but the very next moment that hand caught Michael's leg. Ah! Michael's cheeks were so sharp that it seemed as if even his voice wanted to leave the room and run away. Deep marks had been left on his legs, as if something had entered inside his flesh. Michael fell on the ground. That hand had now reached up to his knees. Her fingers were scratching Michael's flesh one by one. Blood was coming out. Red, hot blood. And just then, one more thing was visible from under the bed. A face. Half the wedding was over, half the skin was burnt. In place of the eyes, there were only 2 black spots. Her lips were torn. Her teeth had fallen out like toads. "You people cannot go from here," who spoke again, and just then the temperature of the room dropped drastically. It became difficult to even take a breath. And we were going. We can't stay alive in this room for long. Part 5. Facing Death. The darkness had become even deeper now. The air inside the room had become so cold that it felt like we had entered a snow cave. Sarah was trembling, and my breathing was so fast that every moment seemed like a final piece. Then, crash! The glass, big mirror glass, kept in the corner of the room, broke with a loud noise. The pieces of glass flew in the air and scattered everywhere. One piece hit my cheek, and a thin cut started bleeding from that place. But I did not care about my injury. My eyes were on that place, from where someone was coming out. A man, without a face. His entire head was hit by a white, smooth shell. He had no eyes, neither nose nor hands, just a split, lifeless piece of wood. But the most terrifying thing was that blood was dripping from his neck. Deep red, hot blood, as if someone had broken his head. Only the lower part of his neck was left, from which the blood drops were dripping. Even his slightest movement would produce a strange, bone-breaking sound. And then she started extending her hands towards us. Her hands were black, dried. Fingers were so thin, as if only bones were left. Nails, long, sharp, and grew out of their heads. If one pricks her once, it would penetrate inside the heart. Sarah was crying loudly. Her breathing was like someone was drowning in water. His tears were reaching his throat, but not a single word was coming out of his throat. Michael. He was lying unconscious in a corner. His mouth was open, as if he had seen something which was not worth seeing. And that faceless man was now coming closer to us. The temperature of the room started dropping. I thought my skin would freeze. My hands became as cold as ice. And then the room door opened with a loud noise. For a moment I thought maybe I was saved. But when I looked, the receptionist was standing in front of us. The one who always remained silent. The one who had told us earlier, "Don't stay here." His face was as dead as the atmosphere in the room. He said softly, "I told you, don't stay here." And then his eyes turned black, and from behind a faceless man hit us hard on the cheek. Part 6. Truth or Death. Without thinking, we ran away from the ship. Our breathing was getting difficult. Our hearts were beating so fast that it felt like it would jump out of our chests. That cold, dead voice was still calling us from behind, but we didn't have the courage to look back. The wooden floor of the ship was creaking under our feet, as if it also wanted to stop us. We felt the whole ship's lie slowly rocking. as if some invisible force was pulling it deeper into the water. Our vision was blurring, but there was only one thing on our mind. We had to get out of here. But then we saw it. As we reached the main deck of the ship, there was a photo frame, placed on a days-old, dust-covered table. The dust on it made it look like it had been lying there for decades. But that photo, our eyes were wide open. It was him, the same man, the same receptionist, the exact same suit, the same mysterious smile, the same empty, scary eyes. But that was impossible, because the words on the bottom of the photo frame read, James Carter, receptionist, died 1952. Our breath stopped. A cold wave ran down our spines. We had seen him. We had talked to him. He was watching us. But he had died in 1952. Then we remembered. From the moment we first stepped on board, everything was strange. There were no other passengers. There were no crew members. There was only the receptionist. The air suddenly became colder. It seemed as if someone was standing right behind us. From somewhere far away, the same dead voice of a child came again. You cannot go from here. Both of us looked at each other, and without wasting a moment, started running. If we had waited there for one more minute, then perhaps today our picture would also have been in the same frame.